All right, so we're now recording. It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2026, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, this is Indiana Tech, MBA 6320, Leading Global Projects. We're in Module 5, and I'm your professor, Dr. Michael Pirazio. So almost done, right? We only have one more module after this one. All right, let's see. So in Module 5, we conclude our project management process groups with the closing phase. So we're going to talk briefly about the closing phase tonight. And your learning objectives this week are to outline the necessary steps in closing a global project, describe common enablers and barriers to closing a global project, and then also describe the current best practices and tools in closing a global project. So the activities this week, we have a discussion again on enablers and barriers, all due by Thursday. Then you have your first assignment, enablers and tools for project closing, and then the assignment 2, your presentation, closing a global project. And of course, your Tech Live reflection. They're all due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. local time. All right, so let's talk about our discussion post. So the requirements for your discussion post for this week include, number 1, you need to choose a peer-reviewed article about a global project and discuss the enablers and barriers identified in the article during the closing stage of the project. Present what you think are the top 3 enablers during the closing stage of the project and explain your reasoning. And then present what you think are the top 3 barriers during the closing stages of the project and also explain your reasoning. And then answer the question, can enablers become barriers? Why or why not? So as we do every week, right, this discussion post is in 2 parts. First part is for you to reply to the numbers 1 through 4 there by Thursday at 11:59 p.m. And then by Sunday, as we do every week, you'll need to post a substantive feedback to at least 2 of your classmates by Sunday at midnight. Again, substantive means, more than a sentence or 2, right? And you can also, the feedback can be you agree or disagree with what your peers are saying. And you should probably, especially if you're disagreeing, need to support it with some kind of reference regarding why you disagree. And then, again, support it with some type of reference. All right, so that's discussion posts. Nothing earth-shattering there. Anybody have any questions on discussion post? All right, not seeing anything, so we'll move on. So Module 5, Assignment 1. You need to review the module materials and lessons in the module. Then you'll complete additional research on enablers for project success and strategies and tools to overcome barriers in closing a global project if necessary. Then create a 2 to 4 page paper to describe how to utilize enablers to improve the probability of project success, as well as strategies and tools that can be employed to overcome barriers in closing a global project. And as part of the requirement of writing your paper, you need to write the paper that describes how to utilize enablers to improve probability of project success and closing. And you need the make sure you look at the instructions. It needs to be in a .doc or .docx formats. And again, a reply should be 2 to 4 pages in length. And once again, following APA writing requirements. So before I move on to assignment 2, I just want to talk for a few moments about closing a project and enablers, or a global project. Because there are some differences from a project that's being worked on here locally in the US and then elsewhere in the world. So for closing a global project, enablers and tools generally focus on knowledge transfer, stakeholder acceptance, and coordination across regions and organizations learning. So in order to do that, there are some common enablers that are used globally. And we'll go through a few of them. First being knowledge management systems. And that usually includes things like a lessons learned repository. Every organization puts them in different places. There's a place for most companies within their SharePoint sites for lessons learned documentation or repositories, or sometimes the PMO itself has a repository for such documents. So knowledge transfer documents are a big deal, right? We need to make sure that we understand why we're doing things and how we're transferring that knowledge globally, right? And there are some challenges there when we're transferring knowledge globally, because we need to consider language, we need to consider how things are written and understood in different areas of the globe. And when we're done, this is all done so we can centralize the project archives for global access. So if somebody wanted to see the lessons learned documents for a project that is being run in the US, but also has pieces of it in Canada, maybe the UK, right? Anywhere they are, they should be able to go into whatever archive that your company uses and provide that global awareness of that document or documents. Also, we look at communication and collaboration platforms. So this is nothing new, because we do this in the US, but more widely used on global projects are things like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, WebEx, etc. So those collaboration workspaces supporting distributed teams in multiple time zones are really important. And translation and multilingual support tools when you need them. Other things we need to pay attention to are governance and closeout frameworks. So things like project closure checklists, stage gate approvals, and sign-off workflows. And you could also have P&O governance templates that align with the PMBOK guide or PMBOK's closing process group. We have documentation and handover tools. So usually that includes things like a final project report or transition to operation plans, a RACI matrix for ownership of transfer. And again, if you're not familiar with RACI, that's a document that outlines who is responsible, who is accountable, who you consult, and who you inform on your project. And just staying here for a second, transition to operations plans. I've found, in my experience of doing this for 20 plus years, this is one of the areas that a lot of companies do not do very well, right? They work on projects, they get the projects approved and prioritized, then they put project managers on, then they have the project team, you execute the project. But oftentimes, what they forget to do is they include the business area in which um, you're going to transition to, right? And sometimes they don't do that until the project is done and we're ready to turn the project over to the department or area that's responsible for the project carrying it forward. And they know nothing about it, right? So it's really important that we keep them informed and we talk about the transition to operational plans early enough in the project that the business side can be prepared for it. And again, oftentimes it's something that's forgotten. And then when you go to transfer it over, there's nobody to take it over. And, the project manager can't hold on to the project forever, right? You're going to be expected to close out the project through the closing process group and then ultimately be reassigned to some new project and move on. So that's one area I just want to caution you about and make sure when you're working on projects that we put enough thought in how you're going to transition to the operations portion of the organization. Stakeholders and acceptance management tools, like, there are some companies have formal acceptance forms of whatever the final deliverable is going to be. Or you might have some type of digital approval, especially, again, if we're talking about global projects and somebody's halfway across the world, right? We need to get authorization somehow. And we use tools like DocuSign or Adobe Sign in order to do that. Stakeholders also participate in satisfaction surveys. And in agile projects, we also engage in what's called as retrospective sessions, right? Retrospective sessions, we review what went well, what didn't go so well, right? And that's what we do usually at the end of every sprint. And then we should also do at the end of the project before we close it out. Performance and reporting systems. Things like KPI, key performance indicators reporting, and also benefits realization tracking tools. Again, that's another area that companies around the world don't do very well. And they're getting better and better at it because usually when we are working through our projects and we are closing our projects, right? We are done as far as the project manager is concerned and our project team is concerned. Oftentimes the benefit is not immediately realized, right? So there needs to be someone who is keeping track of the benefits that were realized about your particular project. That could be, maybe 6 months after the project closes, could be a year, 2 years, right? It all depends on what we said in that business case originally. Maybe we're not going to see a benefit for 3 years, but we need to have somebody who's going to be responsible for measuring that benefit and tracking if we've realized those benefits or not. And again, the project team will be long gone by then, right? They've been moved on to something else. Right, the project team, the project manager is not the person responsible for measuring the benefit of whatever project that you're executing. So sometimes that's held in accounting and finance department, especially if we're looking after return on investments, or it might be if it's for sales and marketing, it could be the sales and marketing department themselves who are managing the benefits realization. Right? Because maybe we're doing a project that's going to help them reduce their internal costs by 50% if we use some kind of new software, or increase their sales by 100%, by year, 2028. And, again, somebody needs to chase that down and make sure they're keeping track of that. And companies are getting better and better at it, and realize that they need to have somebody outside of the project management group do this work. Risks and contract closeout tools. We use things like contract closure checklists, or even at times vendor performance evaluations. And also very common, something we would use is the risk register and issue log and closure validation to make sure that we have no open risks or no open issues on those logs as it pertains to whatever it is we're delivering. And finally, in critical global projects, we have to look at culture and organization enablers and things like executive sponsorship and management support, cross-cultural awareness and training, establish communication protocols if you're going between countries and different languages, knowledge sharing, and also again having to remember the culture relates to that, and then looking at whatever standardized documentation practices exist within those organizations, and are they same or are they different globally? So typical global project closeout deliverables supported these enablers usually include things like final project reports, lessons learned repository, as already mentioned. Again, the transition and handover package that I mentioned as well, that oftentimes a lot of companies don't do very well. Contract closure documents, benefit realization, as we just moved through. And finally, the resource release plan, right? At the end of a project, we don't want to release our human resources or our resources in general. They don't have to be just human resources until we are sure we're done with our project. So normally, when a project is implemented, in a lot of organizations, a lot of companies think, well, the work is over. And that's not exactly true. So after the project is implemented, there's still usually in most companies what's known as a warranty period. And we provide some kind of warranty period to make sure once we implement a project that there's no immediate problems, right? We want to monitor that for at least a period of 2 weeks, and some organizations monitor it for a month. Again, it just depends on the company. So when we're talking about from the PMBOK perspective, right, that's Project Management Body of Knowledge from Project Management Institute, these enablers support the closed project or phase activities by ensuring acceptance, knowledge capture, organizational process assets updates. So what is that, right? They're known as OPAs, organizational process assets. So that is something like training materials, maybe design documents, things of that nature. Transitioning of deliverables, again, to the operation, as I already stated. So for global projects specifically, cultural alignment and distributed knowledge transfer are often the biggest success factors during project closure. So again, that's just kind of a high level overview of what can be included in global projects. And, I go over some of this stuff every week because I realize that not, most of my students, have not been involved in global projects and may have been in, if they've been involved in project management at all at this point. Sometimes it's just, local projects. So again, global projects are very different. They're a bit more complex and a little bit more to look at. All right, so that module 1 assignment, again, not anything earth-shattering there. Anybody have a question about that assignment before I moved on to assignment 2? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next one. So module 5 assignment 2, we want to review the course material and lessons in the module. And then you're going to create a brief presentation with a chart, graph, or visual representation outlining the necessary steps for closing a global project. So in the assignment, you'll create a presentation that outlines, again, the necessary steps closing in the global project. And if you need to follow through with instructions, it's on the instruction tab of the assignment. And your presentation should be 3 to 5 slides in length and in a PPT or PPTX format. So again, not a big assignment here, right? 3 to 5 slides, should not be very dramatic. And as far as if you've ever created PowerPoint presentations, especially for executive leadership, they should be simple in nature, right? They should be few bullet points highlighting your talking points. And then if you want to have additional detail, you put that in the bottom of the talking notes. And you should be good. Again, 3 to 5 slides. That's all it takes. And of course, in the learning management system is the rubric for the assignment if you just want to make sure that you're hitting all the pertinent areas. All right, any questions about that assignment? Again, pretty self-explanatory, I think. Okay, not seeing anything. And finally, again, as we do every week, Tech Live session. You want to make sure that you're providing your reflection for your 10 points, right? We're getting close to the end of the course, and you want to make sure you have as many points as possible to do as well as you possibly can. So in saying that, I think most of you done pretty well in this course. And if there's 1 or 2 of you out there that have some things that are behind, you need to catch them up this week, right? Because we only have 1 more week, and then I'll have grades that are due. And I can't do anything with late assignments after the end of next week, right? So if you have anything that's past due and you want to make sure that you turn it in to be considered for grading, make sure that you have that done by the end of this week, the end of week 5, right? So once again, if you have any questions about the assignment, if you have any questions in general, you can direct them to me by email at mcpura001@indianatech.edu. And I'll be happy to reply to you as soon as possible. Usually 24 hours or less, you'll receive a response. One thing that I wanted to address that I haven't had any resolution on is I've reached out to PMI to see how we can overcome the requirement of an email account having to have an EDU address on it to gain the $35 or the student discount to access PMI. So my email was acknowledged, and they were raising it up within the organization since everybody here has a .net email address. So, hopefully they will provide some kind of feedback hopefully before the course ends. If it's not, that's fine. I will still follow through with it because you're not the only class that will need it. But I can also send it to you individually once I receive that, because if you're going to pursue project management as a career, it's a pretty important thing to do to gain access to PMI.org. And if you can do that at a significant discount, by all means, I want you to be able to take advantage of that. So again, I'll continue down that road, and as soon as I find something out, I will let you know. All right. And that's it. Does anybody have any other questions for me? I'll hang on for a minute or two. If not, thank you very much for staying with me tonight, and I look forward to seeing your assignments this week. And have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.